Disaster at sea.
In 1983, the Byford Dolphin oil rig located in the North Sea experienced a historic and horrifying tragic accident. Far below this oil rig, workers live in a capsule up to 270 feet in depth, or 80 meters. It is said that compression divers are some of the highest paid labor workers, but in my opinion, $100,000 to $350,000 a year is not enough. In order to not explode from the change in atmospheric pressure, the divers must slowly submerge themselves to adjust to the 9 atmosphere difference in air compression. They must do the same process when coming back up to the surface. On this tragic, fateful day, one of the crew members on the oil rig accidentally opened their pod before the pressure was stabilized. The result of this caused the men to die instantly. Their blood boiled in their bodies and they exploded everywhere. One diver was standing in front of the entrance and he was sucked out of the small porthole entrance. He was bent in half backwards and sucked out where his body was splattered all over the deck where workers were standing.
Hollywood murder.
This is the gut-wrenching tale of actress Dominique Dunne, who starred in Steven Spielberg's film Poltergeist. For this story, we'll get some help from our friend, the anonymous host.
Probably the most famous tragedies from the Poltergeist realm are those of actresses Dominique Dunne, who played the eldest daughter of the Freeling family. Dunne was murdered shortly after the production wrapped by her then boyfriend, John Thomas Sweeney, an up-and-coming chef in the Los Angeles culinary scene, who strangled her outside her Hollywood home. Sweeney said he was in a swirl of confusion and rage on the night in question and supposedly didn't remember after beginning his assault. He was later convicted of manslaughter in a controversial decision that many felt was unjust, serving under 4 years for the crime. A miscarriage of justice or a possessed man driven to murder.
Once he was released, he went right back to his job as head chef at a restaurant in Santa Monica. John is still alive. He's 68 years old.
Missing father.
In 1961, 30-year-old George Carroll vanished. George was a Korean War veteran. When George didn't come home after a few days, his 4 children wondered where he was. They asked their mother, and she told them that he went out to do something. A suspicious detail about their father leaving for so long was that his wallet was still at the house. The children would continue to ask about George, and their mother would tell them to stop talking about it and not ask about their father anymore. Shortly after George's disappearance, their mother got a new boyfriend named Richard Darris. Richard moved into the house. Later in the 1980s, they would get divorced and Richard would move to Mexico. In the 90s, Michael, the youngest son, would buy the family home from his mother. His mother passed away a few years later. Fast forward to 56 years after George's disappearance in 2018, Michael and his siblings always felt that something was off about their basement. Strange things would happen in the house, and they always thought there was something going on down there. Michael was in the medical field and believed in science, but out of curiosity, he had a paranormal investigator come to the house, and they said there was some activity coming from the basement. He then had a psychic come to the house, and they said there was energy coming from the basement, and specifically pointed to a certain spot in the floor. Radar technology would confirm that there was something 6 feet below the surface. This only furthered the siblings' lifelong feelings about the basement. So along with his 2 sons, Michael dug up the basement floor only to find the bones of his deceased father. He was struck in the head and buried alive. On Halloween, Michael filed a police report. The investigation is currently ongoing. Richard, the boyfriend of the deceased mother, had passed away a few months earlier, the final person to know the truth, taking it with him to the grave.
Falling from the sky.
In the year 1932, the world's largest helium-fueled aircraft flew across the country from New Jersey to California. The ship desperately needed to refuel, so it made an emergency stop in San Diego. Unfortunately, there were no properly trained Navy sailors at the location to attempt the docking and grounding process. When the anchor ropes dropped from the ship, the sailors grabbed them and attempted to anchor the ship. Unfortunately, the San Diego heat made the ship even lighter, and the ship lifted into the sky, pulling a group of sailors into the air. When the ship reached over 350 feet in the air, 2 of the sailors were so tired they couldn't hang on. They let go of the lines and fell to their deaths. One 19-year-old sailor was able to hold on for over an hour. He reached a height of 2,000 feet. This is when he was finally pulled on board the ship. The sailor's name was Charles Cowart. Charles was described as an unusually tough young man who was also a welterweight boxer. Once on board the ship, his first words were, "Gimme something to eat." After the event, he said, "I just hung on. I saw the other fellows fall, and it didn't make me feel any too good, but there was nothing I could do about it, excepting to hang on tighter."
Cult family. A young man named Kennedy Ife woke up in August of 2016 in his North London home. He told his family that he had a horrible pain in his throat. He was not acting like himself. In an attempt to calm his son down, Kennedy's father took hold of him. This set Kennedy off on a rampage. Kennedy bit his father, then threatened that he was going to cut off his own penis. Kennedy, in one of his outbursts, screamed that there was a python snake inside of his body. The family thought this has to be the work of the devil. They decided to strap him to a bed and perform an exorcism. So as he was strapped to the bed, they surrounded him and began to pray. They did this for 3 days. When the medics arrived at the house, Kennedy was dead. Based on all the evidence, the entire family of 7 people were accused of manslaughter. The father, Kenneth, told the jury that he was the one who instructed his sons and used, quote, overwhelming force on his son to subdue the demon inside of him. The family was in court for 4 days, pleading their case. In the end, the jury found all 7 of the family members not guilty of the murder. Infamous axe murders. The Moore family went to sleep in their home in Villisca, Iowa. Unbeknownst to them, there was a 9th person in the house. Someone who was not going to sleep. The murderers began the sickening act. They started with Josiah. There were also gouges in the ceiling above him from the murderer swinging the axe so vigorously. The killer then made their way to the bedrooms of the Moore children. Reverend Kelly was a main suspect in the Moore family murders. Reverend Lynn George Kelly. He was an odd man that made many uncomfortable. He left town the morning after the murders and apparently told others on his train that there had been 8 people killed in Villisca. This was around 5 a.m. The bodies weren't discovered until after 7 a.m. The police had no other leads, and he was as good as a suspect as they were going to get, so they pressured the confession out of him. Reverend Kelly recanted his confession. The Reverend was set free. No one was ever found guilty of the murders. Thank you for watching. Full videos on my YouTube channel.